All right, this is a very basic, brief introduction to Beautiful Soup. Beautiful Soup is a Python package that lets you parse HTML to basically scrape websites. It's designed specifically for this purpose. Now, you might think, why bother with a new Python package to do this when, in principle, you can scrape an HTML page just by using regular expressions, right? At the end of the day, you're really just looking for patterns. The reason is because Beautiful Soup is very useful when you are dealing with pages that have a very similar structure. It's basically designed to take apart a web page and let you go through it. So it'll take apart each piece, every tag, and let you search through it as lists. It'll return it in the form of lists so you can look through. And so if you have information like, I want the third table on the page, or the fifth row of the third table on this page, you can exploit that. Beautiful Soup will let you find that piece of information very easily, very concisely. That's why it's valuable. So get started. So we have here one example that I wrote a little while ago. So this is used to parse the tables of election results from Indian state assembly elections. So first thing I want to note is that you can see all the comments I've written out here. So we start out with the header. This is just basic. It's not specific to doing anything with Beautiful Soup. It's just good coding practice. So we have like a header, gives the name of the file, who made the file, date, and gives a description of what the file does. Then we have our imports. We need to import these packages that we're going to use. And then there's the body. You can see it's broken up in by comments, so blocks of comments like this. This file is relatively simple, so there's really only one block here. And then note, anytime we're starting something new or something a little bit complicated, we have all these comments to make sure that when we find the file some months or years or whatever later, that we'll be able to understand what it does and how it does it. All right, so let's think through Beautiful Soup. So let's find an example. It's always useful to pull up an example of the website that you're trying to scrape. So in this case, so normally when you're scraping a web page, you will access each URL. So you'll have some algorithm for finding the different URLs that you want to scrape, and then you'll loop through those, grab them with something like PHP or request, for example, and then you'll start parsing it. So in this case, I actually used another utility to download all of the pages of interest here. So they're all on the hard drive, so we can skip that step here. All we're doing now is stripping out the data that we want. So let's open one example. So you can see the structure here in this HTML folder. You have a bunch of folders S. So these are referring to different Indian states. So if we look at state 4, let's pull up, so these are each districts here. So these files here are party compositions. This is obviously all specific to this one example, but I think it's useful for you to know the file structure before we get in. So we can pull this up. You can see these are what the pages look like here. So there's this generic term, India Commission, Election Commission of India. So let me pull up another one just so you have a comparison here. So you can see here we have the name of the state, Bihar, the number of the constituency, and then the name of the constituency. And this is pretty common across all of them, right? So these are both in Bihar, so they both list Bihar up here. They just have different names and obviously different election outcomes. So the structure here you can see is down here we'll have a table. It has, so the rows here are basically dates of elections. So there's an election in October 2005, one in February 2005, 2000, 1995, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the dates of the election. And then down here we have parties. So they each have a different abbreviation. So this is basically telling us how did the BJP do in the 1995 election, and you'll see here it got 10.11% of the vote. Back in 1990, it got 14.38. Meanwhile, the Indian National Congress got 13.05% of the vote. All right. Of course, both of these parties were blown out of the water by this party over here. This is the Janata Dal, I believe. Yeah, so they took 69.11%. Obviously, this candidate of this party won. So that's basically the structure. Then down over here, you can see there's another table that has the names of the candidates who won and their runner-up. So they have the names and the percentages they all got. So this is another piece of sort of useful information potentially. All right, so let's look at our file. So what do we do here? So the first thing we do, of course, we're writing this all to a CSV. So we open up a CSV writer. I'm not going to touch on any of that. That's all sort of separate. It has nothing to do with regular expression or nothing to do with beautiful soup. It's just where we're writing the data once we've got it. What we're interested in is when we get down over here. So here we open up the file of interest and we read it, and then we access, use beautiful soup on it here. So to see how this works, to actually work through a file. So if you get a new file, you want to figure out how it's working, you have a new package, you want to figure out how it works. I think it's useful to pull up a command prompt like so, and just start Python. So run Python from the command prompt here. So let's see, we start this up and it starts up. So I have Python version 2.7 on here, or that's the default version. I don't think it's going to matter which version you have for this particular file. So let's pull this up side by side like so. And so here, this is in the middle of a loop, so it's going to sort of loop through different files to try to get all of them, but I think it's more useful to have a single example. So let's pull up this exact file that we're looking here, and we'll just load it. So this is just going to open the file, and then we want to get the actual text, so put that. And now we try to do this here, and of course you'll see it doesn't work because Python doesn't know what beautiful soup is. That's because you need to, of course, import the package. So I've already got the package installed on here, so I can just do the import, and that works out fine. And now let's just try to run that earlier command again, and you'll see it works this time, of course. So what is this doing? Basically, Beautiful Soup is reading it and putting it into a form where it can access the individual parts of this. So how do you use Beautiful Soup? So the main function in Beautiful Soup, or method, forget what the exact Python term is, but the main method it uses is the find all command. So you can learn more about this if you go to the Beautiful Soup documentation here. So they've got some nice examples that go through more detail. But basically the point is our aim with Beautiful Soup is to find different tags which will contain the information we want. And so, not surprisingly, the find all command, find and the find all, so these two methods are the ones that we usually end up using. So when you run find or find all, basically you're searching for a particular tag, and it will return a Beautiful Soup object that lets you further manipulate basically the list of results. So in this case, what do we have here? So our very first find is this. So let's suppose if we go back to the actual, so let's suppose the first thing we want to do is actually get the name of the state right up here, Bihar. All right, so how do we find this? We use the inspect tool of Chrome. It's kind of useful. So it tells us that in the HTML we can find this, and it is contained in this table over here. So that's the first thing we want to think about, right? So this is actually the second table, not the first. The second table. The first one is this kind of lame table that says Election Commission of India and party-wise comparison, blah, blah, blah. So we can sort of ignore that. We really want the second table here. Now, within this table, it's got a bunch of rows, of course, but really, many of these rows are sort of empty. So what we really are interested in is this. Since we're looking for this element here, it's useful to note that this is contained within a bold tag, right? So if we look for bold tags, we will find this. In fact, it's the very first bold tag here, right? So that's not the only one. If you come down here, you'll see the name of the constituency is also contained in a bold tag, but this is the first one. All right, so remember what I said earlier, that Beautiful Soup is very useful if you understand sort of orderings and the structure of the page you're trying to scrape. So what we can do is we find the tables. So this command here, soup, so soup is, of course, the beautiful soup object we grabbed earlier. So if we go to that, and so you can use this syntax here. So you could say soup dot find all, but you can actually take a shortcut here. So they've sort of done an override. So you can just put parentheses and then give the name of the tag you're looking for. So we're looking for the table tag, so we put table in here. And so what is this going to return? Let's suppose we take this and stick it in here, right? So what does this return? It returns that table we have, right? So this is the entire table. Um, well, actually, if we just put in soup table, you're going to get not just one table, but a whole list of tables, which is not what we want, right? We want a single table here. So which one do we want? We want the second one. So remember, Python starts enumerating from 0, so the second table is actually table 1 rather than 2. And so that gets us the table we're looking for. Now, inside of that, what we want, well, remember we just said that we're looking for the bold tag. And so, well, what are we returning here? It's actually not the tag itself, but it's actually another beautiful soup object. So we can actually take this tag we found here and do the same trick, right? Before we were looking for table, and now we've pulled up the first table. Well, now we can go back again, so you can think about this almost like this form here. So we're finding the first table, we've got it, and now we are searching within that, again, this table and everything it contains for a bold tag, right? So that's actually what this is doing. So if you run this, what do we get? Well, we get all of the bold tags, right? So it's actually given, you can see the square brackets here, that means it's a list. So we have one bold tag, which is what we're looking for, it's the name of the state. Then there's another one later on, which is the name of the constituency, and that's it. So we just have those two elements. So since we want the first one, we're looking for the name of the state, we will now just stick, again, our square brackets, which means we want we're accessing an element, an enumerated element of a list, and we want the first one, so we put in a 0. And there we go, we get this. Now if we had instead put in a 1 here, we would have gotten the second element, which is the name of the constituency. So if we wanted the name of the constituency, this might have been a good approach for that. For now, we're just interested in the name of the state. All right. Now, all right, unfortunately, this is not just the name of the state, it's also a bunch of other crap that's, stylistic, right? So there's basically, within this, there's another font tag, which actually contains what we're looking for. So now, once again, we're going to go back to all this over again. We've got this big bold tag, and now within it, there's a font tag we want. And so that's what we're going to do, right? We're going to access that font tag by, again, putting these parentheses here and putting font in quotes. And so within the second table, so we are looking within the, we want the font tag within the first bold tag in the second table on this page, right? That's what the statement is saying. And that it gets us that. Now, how do we actually access? Well, again, so one thing to sort of keep in mind, even though there's only one element here, it's actually still a list, right? You can tell that because of the square brackets. So to get the first element of this one element list, we again have to put in this square bracket 0 here. Right, and so now it's no longer, you can see the square brackets have gone away, it's no longer a list, it's just the tag. All right, we've got this object. Now, still not done because we want the contents of this. So another useful feature is, since this is a tag object, or I don't actually know what it's called, the class, but since this is an object returned by Beautiful Soup, it has a bunch of properties defined, and the one we're interested in is called string. This basically tells us the contents of the tag. So we run all of this entire statement, and there you go. So it actually returns it. You can see the U thing here, so it's telling us this is actually a Unicode string. You can do conversions later on. So actually, when I write this, I have to convert it all to a normal sort of string here, but we don't have to worry about that right now. You may have to make those conversions. You may or may not. I think in this case I actually didn't, but just sort of keep in mind it's being returned as Unicode. And so there we have it. We were able to find that. Now, obviously, you can do this in all sorts of other things. So for example, you can see if you scroll down further in my code, you can find where I search through this whole table of results here and look through and go through one by one and actually get the results for each party. But I'll let you look through that yourself. One of the best ways to learn how to use these things is to look through other people's code and then play around a little bit. So best of luck, happy hunting. I hope everything, your adventures in beautiful soup are enjoyable.